Yeah, man. It seems like you and I are of a very similar mind when it comes to boxing. We've been around the game for a long time. We draw our opinions from experience and from data, not from how we feel or some dogmatic BS that some coach said to us 20 years ago. We're
Right.
out here testing it.
Or a goddamn Reddit forum. Not that there's not good information on Reddit,
Yes,
but
yes,
that's like that last
yes.
video. Did you see that last one I did on sparring?
No, but I heard that there was some backlash. What happened?
Yeah. No, nothing more than what I thought. I'm recording, by the way, just so you know, but and we'll kind of
Perfect.
segue into it. But yeah, so because this is actually one of our talking points, right? But yeah, I said specifically like, hey, like these are some thoughts on sparring, and I did my best as I always tried to do, which is to be nuanced, right? Which, as you know, it's the
Yep,
nuance is the truth, right? But
that's right.
and then I wrapped it up with, hey, comment below, but please like kind of reserve hardcore opinion for people that have fights in boxing specifically or have trained fighters in boxing specifically. And then if you don't
Yep.
fall into those categories, you can still say something that's fine, but like please preface it with like, hey, like I heard this, right? Which is how I
Yeah.
would like to think I would do it. I probably haven't always spoken like that, but I would like to say if I didn't know shit about, it's like with me jujitsu, it's like I would say like, yeah, I've heard this thing about jujitsu, like that's what I think is the case, but that's what I've heard. Versus saying like this is how it is, right? And yeah, so inevitably though, I still got motherfuckers on there. Blah 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 blah. I do this in Muay Thai, I do this in MMA, and it's like that's cool, that's fine. I understand it's different, and that's fine. And I'm not saying it should be different. I'm just talking about boxing.
Yeah. So we do not have like a hard sparring culture at our gym.
Mm-hmm.
When we want to do hard sparring, we travel to another gym and everybody kind of understands what the deal is. We go down to Boston or we go over to New York, we bring a flight of guys and they line up a bunch of guys and we send it. But at our gym, we don't really spar that hard. But because this is an MMA gym, not just a boxing gym,
Mm.
this happens every time one of the Muay Thai guys comes over to spar with the boxers. They always say the boxers spar so hard. And I assure you, I can tell you as a coach that we don't spar hard, not by boxing standards,
Right.
but by Muay Thai standards where there are shins and elbows and knees involved. You have to go so much lighter and be so much more playful and so much more careful. What would be considered our like normal sparring feels hard, looks really brutal to people that don't understand the differences between boxing and Thai.
That makes sense. And something I related it to, or someone in my comments related it to that was in agreement with me about the hard sparring concept. Like one, you're totally right. Like boxing hard versus lighter sparring is still too hard in that world, right? Of
Yeah.
MMA and Muay Thai. Like it's still like that's too hard. But then he related to the jiu-jitsu, and so for my like 5 or so months of doing jiu-jitsu, I can attest to this is that flow rolling versus like hard rolling, there's a difference. And from what people tell me, it makes a difference in competition. Like if you are only flowing, specifically like as a white belt or whatnot, and you don't feel what that pressure feels like and know how to overcome or relax with the pressure, then you're maybe not getting the full experience that you need in the full
Yeah.
preparation.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to like, when people say hard and people say light, I think you hit the nail on the head when we talk about like flow. You know, in boxing, even when you're going light, light really means that it's an intent. You're not going to try to hurt the other person. You're not going to go for the finish. You're not going to follow through on those punches, but you're still quick and you're still busy and the pace is still high.
Yeah.
It's not a flow. I think a lot of jujitsu folks, MMA folks, and Muay Thai folks that come into boxing, when you say you want to do a light spar, that has less to do with intent and more to do with like pace. It's
Mm.
like this very like slow, flowy, tit and tat, taking turns kind of culture that is appropriate for those sports where there are more variables to worry about,
Mm-hmm.
but isn't sufficient for a sport like boxing where it's just two fists above the waist.
Yeah.
Because the variables are so much more streamlined, you can still maintain that speed and that pace. You can just pull back the damage.
Right.
And that's what it means to go lighter in boxing.
Yeah, and to your point, just to not sound like I'm just copying what you're saying, you do. Like this is the culture we built up, with my operation is everyone understands we're all on the same team, right? So everyone in our gym understands we're all on the same team. What does that mean? That means that you don't try to knock each other out. And it doesn't happen very often, but it doesn't ever mean that that's never happened. I would say head knockouts hasn't happened in a long time with in
Yeah.
between, our own team. Maybe body shots has, because culturally that's a little bit more acceptable, even though that can still be
Yeah.
dangerous. So, but to your point, we reserve the hard sparring, which is very hard sparring most of the time, unless it's otherwise specified, for going to other gyms, right? And that's how our
Yeah.
team is understood as well. Because, too, with running a gym and having a team of fighters, you don't want that type of that horrible vibe that you can get within your own team when it's like if you're on, I on
Culture.
this, yeah, you and I on the same team, and it's like you beat the hell out of me last time and really went overly hard on me, and now I have this attitude every time I walk in the gym where it's like, man, Anthony's like, I got this bad vibe from you now that you just like really went over the top beating the hell out of me. But if we go to another gym and do that, and that happens, like, that's okay, and that is what's going to properly prepare me for competition.
Yep. Yeah. I have that conversation with my guys a lot where I talk to them about how your sparring in the team at the gym should be competitive. If it's not, you need to find a way to hamstring or handicap yourself so that it is. So I've got a lot of guys that are very large, very experienced, very quick athletes. And when they're working with people who might just be like sparring in the gym, they're just doing defense or they're just hitting the body or they're just throwing their jab. If you're in there steamrolling somebody on your team, coach is going to show up. He's going to pull you to the side and he's going to tell you, okay, you're only hitting the body now. Or, okay, you're only using your left hand now. Or,
Yep.
okay, you're only using your head movement now, but you got to find a way so that it's competitive. That's the best way to grow. I bring that down. You're probably in a similar situation to me where like you probably mix up with the boys a lot. I'm still competing, but I'm competing and I'm training with a team of guys that I've taught everything that they know.
Right.
So I spend most of my sparring at the gym working on something. Oh, I'm only throwing my 5 this round. I'm only moving to my right this round. I'm only using my jab this round. I'm only working on the outside this round. You have to find a way. I tell my guys, when you're working with somebody, you can meet them and use them on your team in 2 different ways. You can either meet them at their strength to try to learn from them at what they're best at, or you can try to completely erase that strength. But you may notice that neither of those things is you showing up and just forcing the thing that you're best at
Yeah.
onto the scene,
Yes. Yes. Well, and to that point of the man, I have to admit, I really have not sparred with any of my higher level people probably since I started coaching since I opened up my first gym in 2013. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple reasons for it. One is the sustainability thing because I've had a lot of health issues and blah blah. And being a coach and being a coach in the way that I wanted to be a coach, which is like I'm gonna like pour myself into it too much, which is a rookie coach mistake.
Yep.
My
Yep.
my joints couldn't handle holding mitts and trying to do a little bit of sparring, and also too, it's been a process of me going from even on the same team, we are beating the living crap out of each other. It's been a process of me going from that to where we are now over the past 8 years. We've been in that place that you're at, but it took a while to get there. So with that mindset though, I wouldn't spar with my guys or anything else like that, particularly once they got to a certain level at all, because then it becomes this weird competitiveness right?
Yeah.
It puts me in the wrong, and I'm not saying this necessarily applies to yourself because you are competing, but it puts me in the wrong mindset as a coach where it's like, okay, I'm now have a little bit of thing of like, well, am I trying to one up my guy or am I trying to improve him? And so to your point, like how you do it
Yeah.
penetrates that perfectly. But from my background where every time sparring in the gym was hard, even if we were on the same team, then automatically it was like, dude, I can't even touch that because I don't want to start touching that because once I do, then it becomes a thing of like, well, now I got to prove myself to my guy, or my guy goes like, well, man, coach isn't that good. Whereas now I just give little glimmers showing that I know things and can do things. And that's enough to kind of add that little bit of like respect. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I've been growing the team here for a long time. We have success, but I am nervous of exactly what you're saying, where I haven't yet brought a guy up to the level where he's as good or better than me yet. It's coming, and I dread trying to be clever and figuring it out. When that day does arrive. I like to hope that
Right.
I've created enough of a growth mindset in the gym that we're never really fighting each other.
Right.
But there's this quote in jujitsu that I really like. I'm sure you've heard it before, but where they say coaching jujitsu is like teaching snakes to bite you. And I always loved that
Hmm.
quote because every once in a while, my guys will hit me with something that I taught them. And the competitor in me is like, damn it, I got. But the
Yep.
coach in me is like, hell yeah, I got because I
Yeah.
taught him that. And it's, it's definitely a ride trying to balance the competitor and the coach in you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, jumping to, I can see some of my questions that I prepared, but I know you had a couple
Go
real
for it.
simple streamlines. No, 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 no. Let's go for yours first. So let's do the
Okay.
Canelo Crawford because we're going to get this out before that happens. Maybe we'll get this out like
Cool.
Friday
Smart.
before.
Smart.
So give me your quick analysis. I haven't honestly heard anything you said about it, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I haven't, I haven't. Yeah, you put a gun to my head. All right. You put a gun to my head and you'd have to get me to really commit if I was going to put money down or something. And
Yep.
I think there's a good chance we see Crawford win by decision. If you force me to make a decision. But, with that being said, I could talk myself into this fight going any way. I could talk myself into either guy winning a decision, either guy winning early or late. I could talk myself into a knockout for any guy. And I think a lot of people are ignoring a really obvious potential, you know, result, which is that this is a boring fight. Where
Yes.
that this is a boring fight, where Canelo doesn't want to put his foot on the gas and take the risk, and maybe Crawford's a little sluggish from moving up a couple weight classes, or he feels Canelo's power and feels a little undersized and doesn't want to risk it. And these guys kind of stare at each other and faint at each other for 12 rounds. They're both smart enough that that could certainly happen. Neither of them are meatheads. These are both intelligent guys at the top of the sport who are really, really good fighters who don't want to get hurt and haven't really gotten hurt in any of their fights previously. So, I hope it's a banger. I hope it's like Hagler Duran, which is one of my favorite fights, with a big guy and a small guy, and there's switch hitting in that equation there. That's what I'm hoping for. But I think a very real possibility is that we all show up and guys like you and I that are coaches and love the theoretical game, we're on the edge of our seats the whole time watching nothing happen, and everybody else is going and getting more chicken buffalo dip from the bar, you know?
Right. Right. That's a great analysis. I like how you said it where that oh man. Yeah, I should have interrupted you when you said it because I really liked it.
That's okay. That's
Uh,
okay. Yeah.
but the good analysis on the absolutely going to be a boring fight, quite possibly because they don't want to risk it because they're also smart. And that's one thing that it's
Yep.
funny is that well, with fighters being smart at a high level and relatively evenly matched, it can easily make for a very boring fight, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that's interesting culturally with boxing, right? That's changed over the years versus, I guess now old school is the 90s, right? But I think even older than that. But even when I look back on the 90s and how fighters generally fought in the 90s, it was a little bit
It
more
freaks me
rugged.
out when kids say that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But even when I look back, though, I'm starting to
for
feel
sure.
that vibe, right? Of being like, well, I guess 90s is old school now. Because if you look at like a lot of 90s fights as how they compare to current fights at the high level, it's a lot more reserved now at the high level. I think maybe because a lot of times the guys are trying to be more smart, or maybe they're also more protected too. That's another thing. But anyway, though, I think it creates a recipe for what you're saying. We know Canelo to turn in bad performances. I will say the one thing that probably won't happen. I will say my prediction is that I don't believe Crawford will be able to stop Canelo. I don't believe that is possible. I guess I would say the only world
Okay.
where it is possible for me that that could happen is if somehow he makes Canelo quit, right? Which I don't know if that's possible,
Mm.
but I
Like
don't think I think
Lomachenko all those years ago.
right. like Canelo gets so frustrated, but he would have to really. So I mean, that's not possible. But it's like if I'm gonna say that's more possible to me than him actually stopping him with a punch. But I could be dead fucking wrong. But I think that might be the case.
Yeah, I so like I've been the last year, the journey that I've been on, is I've been reworking my punch mechanics to really kind of get that nice, like whippy, pure punch. I just had my first fight back this past Saturday, video
Nice.
coming soon. I knocked the guy out in the second round. So, we're testing, thank you very much. We're testing these punch mechanics. And I think Crawford's got him. I think he does. Now, with that being said, as a coach and as somebody who's experienced watching fighting, that you learn how to throw a punch the right way. And then you have that real pure punch mechanic, that ability to accelerate and generate a lot of power, use that stretch reflex on your shoulder and your hips.
Yeah.
But also, you learn how to take a punch. And golly, is Canelo great at seeing the punch coming, being nice and relaxed, bracing his head either with his hand or with his shoulder, rubbernecking with that shot. He's got so many layers of defense that he can fall back on that aren't just the attribute of him being large and having a tough chin. They're the attribute of him knowing how to take the sting off of a punch. So I agree with you in the sense that I think that Canelo's knowledge of how to ride a shot will likely nullify Crawford's ability to throw a really hard, powerful, snappy shot.
And his defense too.
And his defense, yep, and his defense. But I do think that if Crawford could get a well-placed shot, I think that the physics of it, he's more than able to hurt Canelo.
Okay, yeah. Agreed with that.
Yeah.
100%.
I think a lot of people, I know you're too smart for this, but a lot of people are saying Canelo's too big to be hurt by Crawford. I really think that Canelo is too skilled to be hurt by Crawford. I don't think it's a size issue.
Yeah. And I would say like outside of size and skill, he's also just very rugged. So that's like the last line, right? It's like I remember talking to one of my guys that he's now in Texas, and he won regionals and things like that for Golden Gloves, and I was telling him how, hey, like he's like, oh, coach, I'm gonna win because I'm tough or something like that. He said, and I was like, hey, dude. Everybody that is now at your level that he's going to nationals at that time a couple of years ago, I was like, everybody is tough. Everyone is tough that's here at Philly. Like it's like you can't rely on that anymore. So like to your point, Canelo doesn't rely on that, number one, but he has all these layers of defense, not only good foundational defense. That's one thing that I really became a supporter of him, kind of midway through his career. Like with his fight with Cotto and stuff like that, him showing just really solid foundational defense as the way I believe it and teach it. And then, like you're saying also, then his extra layer of, well, when that doesn't work, what does he do? Is he able to ride punches and things like that and take off the steam? And then below that even is his actual ruggedness and his ability to psychologically be tough and not be worried about getting hurt and all those things that make it. Yeah, but to your point, if Canelo just lets Terrence, or if Terrence makes it happen somehow where it connects and it connects in the right place and the right timing, yes, absolutely, I agree that he could rock Canelo and put him down or put him out. It's possible, but I feel like all those factors go into play. That I feel more likely is somehow Canelo quitting for some reason.
Yeah,
I feel like
I can see that
might be something.
Golly, don't cancel me. Those Mexicans don't quit.
Hey, that's true.
That's true. I think he's got too much pride. I think he's got too much machismo. And obviously, you and me are talking about fractions of a fraction of 1% of a possibility of what could happen in this fight.
100%.
Of course. But we've seen Canelo get outboxed. I'll die on the hill that he got outboxed in the first Triple G fight. He got outboxed by Bivol. He got outboxed by Floyd Mayweather. If Bivol and Floyd's performances against Canelo did not break his will, I don't suspect Crawford's will,
Good point.
Because Crawford's going to get in there and he's going to try to mix it up. Like Canelo's going to get his. I think that both of these guys are going to show up, at least from the start, trying to fight, trying to win. And I could see a lot of situations where both of them would get deterred and might focus a little bit more on safety from doing that. But I really think the first half of this fight, after they felt each other out, I'll bet we get 3 or 4 rounds of them like really working in there before they kind of settle into a rhythm, you know?
Yeah, man, I really hope from a boxing fan perspective, and maybe he can make it work, but I hope Terrence does what he did against Spence and just,
that would be awesome.
And countering and drive him back, but it's not likely. But yeah, and yeah, thank you for saying that. I want to be very clear for anyone that watches this. I'm not saying Canelo's a quitter or he's going to quit.
Of course.
I'm just where you're talking about 0.01 possibilities. But well, cool. So if you had to bet, you would bet on Terrence going into this?
I would bet. Here's my honest answer. If the world was good and fair, I would bet on Terrence Crawford by decision. Canelo is certainly the A side. And he might have a couple rounds in the bank before this fight even kicks off. All right. The business of professional boxing is an ugly one, Yes.
Correct. Cool. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I hate to just agree with you so much, but yeah.
I'm a smart guy. It makes sense.
Now let's go into a little bit of, because someone mentioned in one of my comments, and so it led me to watching your video on it, and I thought it was really cool, the ideas behind it and the theory behind it. Because again, like I'm sure you probably agree with me, so much of this is art and philosophy, as opposed to just like a hard and bolt, science of, it's not 2 + 2 = 4, it's 2 + 2 sometimes equals 4, sometimes equals 5, it's a little bit all over the place. But let's talk about lane theory, right? So that's something that,
yes, please.
You've kind of coined, you kind of came up with that on your,
yeah.
So
lane theory is the system of positions that I have gleaned from having many wonderful coaches over the years and lots of tape study. And it's the idea that from certain positions, you can only get hit quickly and powerfully with specific punches. All right. This is the boxing 101 system you need to learn before you can move on to playing the meta. This is the meta that you need to understand to succeed at the amateur level, the hit and don't get hit game of boxing, so that you can recognize how to undermine it as you progress, maybe move on to pro or move on to the Olympics or higher level stuff. But, lane theory is the thing that's going to give you success early, and it's going to demystify a lot of the scariness and the attribute-centric way that novices think about boxing. It used to drive me insane because, I've been boxing for 23 years. I started boxing in 2002. I've been doing this for a long time, and I took some breaks in there. I did Taekwondo for 4 years as an adult. I had 4 MMA fights. I had 2 Muay Thai fights. I did jiu-jitsu for 6 years. I wrestled in Iowa for a semester when I was in high school. I've diversified and done a lot of martial arts. And of every martial art that I've ever participated in, there is no martial art where young men, here to quote the youth, where young men cope more than in boxing. There's always an excuse for why somebody performed badly. Oh, that guy was faster. Oh, I'm not in shape. Oh, he was bigger. Oh, I don't have power. The sun was in my eyes. I missed breakfast. I didn't sleep good last night. The wind's in the wrong direction. Whatever. Everybody's got excuses. And that is in complete contrast to like jiu-jitsu, where when somebody finishes a roll and they got tapped, they talk about, okay, I set that up doing this. I got this position. I deceived you with this move. And then when you panicked and did X, I did Y and I got the win. And boxing's the exact same thing. There are a series of principles and positions. They happen really fast and they only exist briefly. They're not static like they are in jiu-jitsu, but right. There are principles that are true from every street beef fight all the way up to Canelo versus Crawford, Right. And if you can learn these positions, then you can get ahead defensively. You can practice proactive defense, which is going to give you more success, which is going to help you land your counters, which is going to keep you safe. And more importantly, is going to give you the accountability to recognize that if you get hit, it's because of a mistake or a misunderstanding. It's never, ever, ever that your opponent did something that was so good that you couldn't have defended it. You either made an error or you misunderstood the situation. And that's what lane theory is.
And now one thing though, so like, this is good because we're finding a place of maybe unalignment, right? I generally
please, yes,
but then I have details of unalignment. So like what I've experienced, contrast, I 100% agree about the boxer thing. Like, dude, It is so refreshing to be around jiu-jitsu people. And it's a very clear thing of like, yeah, you caught me, and you caught me because this happened, because I didn't do this, or because I did this, right? Now, the thing that I notice, and it's because I find myself getting here as a boxer, and it wasn't necessarily something that was always a good trait for me as a boxer, but it also wasn't a bad trait, is the relying on spontaneity, right? Or unpredictability, right? So I see that to be a fairly important factor in boxing, at least in different ways. And it can be that in obviously the other martial arts as well. You know, it's like I did a move on someone the other day, and it was because I'd never done it before to them. They didn't expect for it to come, and that's why it worked, right? And so to me, that is kind of the only thing, after watching your lane theory video, which was very well done, the only kind of slight deviation I see from it is that the element of randomness or of different patterns. So example, like let's take a specific situation of it, is like, I agree with you. If I'm leaning on the right side, on my right side, then I am typically open to your right hand, right? To generate power, correct?
Correct.
Right. And so, and I'm with you on that, but I have seen guys manage to get off a hard jab, maybe a hard left hook for the body, that since you're over there. Like one of my favorite fighters, Dwight Muhammad Kauai, when he fought Michael Spinks, if I remember correctly.
He's
Michael
also one of my favorite fighters.
Yeah, you and I were too
I
much
love
alike.
Kauai.
But Michael, if I remember correctly, it was long. I watched that fight like 15 years ago. But anyway, or actually longer, 20 years ago, I think. But anyway, left hook for the body, I think, was what was shutting down some of how Kauai was dipping off to the right side, which is something I did a lot. Or like a better example, though, is the opposite. So if I lean on my left side, then like you were saying, you're more so open for the left hook, right? Is that correct? Or what was it?
Yep.
And so, but what I have seen work at high levels and different levels, when a guy knows how to line it up. Now, if a guy doesn't know how to line up, he doesn't get it. The right uppercut is there, right? Or even a right hand. And like to your point, it might not be the maximal generated power, but it's still relevant. And so I'll see guys, they'll shoot a right hand, they'll drop on that side, and then they'll get ripped up by an uppercut or a right hand by a person that is able to position themselves. And that's one of the, get off my soapbox real quick, one of the big things that changed my mind about this kind of early on in my coaching journey, about 2015, 14, I had a couple guys, pro fighters, brought them up to Maryland. And that's where I saw like Jarrett Hurd and, Reed, I can't remember his first name. A few of these other DC fighters. Lamont Roach was there. All those guys. And what I was impressed by, which I didn't quite see in the South where I was at so much, I just didn't notice it, is how these dudes could just be like this and then hit you there, hit you there, hit you no matter where you were positionally. So while I agree as a premise, it's true, but as we maybe go up to different levels or against different types of fighters, there's this deviation. So anyway, that's my soapbox on that.
Yeah, so I got three things that I can talk about with that spontaneity, which is great, you know? So the first thing is, I always make a point when I talk about lane theory, and I say this in all the videos, that lane theory dictates what you can be hit with quickly and powerfully. I always make a point to tell my guys, you can get hit with any punch from any position, but if you're not following lane theory, that punch generally isn't going to be as powerful. You're not going to have room to structure it, you know, or it's going to have a tell. You're going to have to wind it up to be able to throw that. And then that wind up, I mean, I talk about proactive defense a lot. I talk about defense not being reactive, but like it's a fight. There is an expectation. Like you do got to be able to see something. All right. You
Oh,
might not need
100%.
to see, you might not need to see this, but you should be able to see this, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing is lane theory dictates what you can be hit with quickly and powerfully. The second thing I'll say with that spontaneity question is that when you're spontaneous and you try something new, it will work once. You know, it might work twice, you know, but it's important to remember that when you be spontaneous and when you break lane theory, you assume the additional risk of throwing that new shot. So if you do it, you know, if you stand in front of a guy and just throw that right hook over and over again on the line, eventually he's going to kill you. All right. So to quote Roberto Duran, my wife's favorite fighter, you know, good fighters get hit. Great fighters don't get hit with the same thing twice. You know, so you're not going to let that shot hit you over and over again. That's breaking lane theory because you can see it. The other thing I'll say, you know, you talk about spontaneity, but I am 100% sure, having worked at a pros camp for a long time, having traveled around to really competitive talent pools, you know, that like what may appear as spontaneity to some people is a conditioned setup for a shot. Okay, so maybe a guy explodes into like a long, wild right hand. Well, maybe he's fighting in an open exchange and he conditioned that opening to be there and his opponent to misreact by feeding a nice tight cross to that guy's palm over and over again. So he's reaching and then he gets caught with that shot. The best modern example I can think of like that would be a guy like Naoya Inoue, the Japanese fighter. You know, he has all these big, wild knockouts, but if you watch him when he starts fights, he boxes extremely fundamentally. He sets a tone, he sets a pattern, and he breaks that pattern. He's playing on the subversion of his opponent's expectation. He doesn't just go out there and wing wide. Like, you know this. Nobody's winning fights just by their bag of tricks. They're winning fights by their understanding of the fundamentals and knowing when it's appropriate to pull that rug out on somebody.
Right. Now, real quick. So, I see that's why I love the intellect. Yeah. So, spontaneity wouldn't be quite the best phrase for it because then it does sound like I'm saying that pure randomness is like, you know, a panacea in boxing. Although I will say, though, even to argue with myself on that point, is then how would you explain the not elite level success, but large success of guys like Prince Nassim Hamed or Emmanuel Augustus? Emmanuel Augustus, you know, really, Emmanuel Augustus would have been as successful as Hamed if he was in England, right?
Agreed.
He wasn't. He was in the United States, so it was different. But regardless, there was
Don't tell that to the English, but yes.
But there was a level of success by both of those guys, and part of that you could say is ring experience and like almost. It's not that they could necessarily explain it. Maybe they could, but their body knew what was going on, and there was thoughtful setups. But there's also just that element of it's hard to prepare for a fighter like that. And then there is,
that's fair.
I think, the closest thing to what would be spontaneity or randomness, you know, going in there.
Yeah, you know, I always look at guys. You know, you look at a guy like a Roy Jones Jr. or a Prince Nassim or an Emmanuel Augustus, you know, these guys that may appear to be extremely athletic and reactive and agile, and they can kind of bend the rules. An unorthodox style, I don't necessarily, does not necessarily mean that it gets to function outside of the principles that govern success in boxing. You know, just because a guy's hands are down, you know, doesn't mean that he cannot still apply lane theory, that he cannot still apply traffic using his distance and his feet and his head movement, his shoulders, you know, and eventually I'm going to put out a video for my Patreon people. And I've been planning it for a long time. I like this video. It'll be a fun one. Something I teach my open class fighters and my pros is I talk to them about how punches are a myth. You know, we learn the basic 6 punches because I believe that that is the best way to convey the mechanics of how to generate power with your body. I also think that they are the safest punches to throw when you're new because they're small, they're short, and you're protected from one side or the other as you throw them. But if
Right.
you told me to number punches, I could have 50 different punches if we were building a numbered punch systems. But when you exit that system of those basic six, like I said, you assume the risk that comes with breaking those rules. Throwing long hooks comes with risks, throwing overhands comes with risks. You gather risk as you take those. And if you're experienced enough and you understand your positions enough, then of course, like I love to throw a bunch of like goofy long hooks, and the overhand right's like my money punch. And I've been really working on that big wide Foreman right hand to the ribs on the left side. Those are punches that come with risks if you haven't assessed the situation correctly. But I think guys like Prince Nassim and Roy Jones Jr. and Emmanuel Augustus, you watch those guys move around and they understand lane theory. They might not write it down, but they're existing in a system where it's true. Emmanuel Augustus, he goes slip, he rolls back. Prince Nassim, he ducks in, he pulls that away. They all understand the like empirically most likely shots that are coming their way, and they understand the positions necessary to put their bodies in to get the leverage to take advantage of openings. So I would argue that they are unorthodox, but their success isn't necessarily from spontaneity or from some athletic attribute that's unconquerable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm tracking with what you're saying. And then
Yeah.
how would you then assess a more quote unquote basic fighter, then therefore beating somebody like that? So I think Roy Jones is probably like the one I want to pull out of the box of the three people. And I just want to keep it to the two, because Roy, elite level Olympian, and I believe his foundation was much better than both of those other men, which is why he did what he did. And it's why Emmanuel Augustus was a high level club fighter, and Nassim Hamed, his career fizzled out quickly.
Yeah, so again, you and me have had this conversation on the phone before. We talk about how you got to treat novices different from how you treat experienced guys.
Right.
I make all of my novices watch Nassim versus Barrera. All right. I make them watch that fight, and I say, this is why you fight the way I teach you to fight. I tell them, I said, this is why you keep your base, why you keep your hands up, why you set things up with a jab, why you practice proactive defense after you throw a shot. Because when Prince Nassim was in there with Barrera cleaned him up. You want to talk about a guy who could have quit in that fight? Nassim could have quit because he was getting mopped up in that fight, But again, I think that a lot of that has to do with when somebody does something new in boxing, and it looks like they're breaking all the rules. You have to ask yourself, okay, do we misunderstand what boxing is, or have they just not fought somebody who can wield the system of a boxing at a focused enough, strict enough, high enough level to punish them for not adhering to the system? And with a guy like Prince Nassim, I think he understands these principles, but I think that he is happy to play that showman, And I don't want to say he bought his own hype a little bit, but like I think you can see his success locally in England, and you can say that he wielded those principles great against people that couldn't wield the system as well as Barrera could. I don't necessarily think that means that he's a bad fighter. It just means that he can't hold on to bending and breaking. He can't hold on to solving those problems in such a suboptimal, inefficient manner against such high-level competition.
Right. And then something I do want to throw in there, and sorry for having the last word on this one before we jump to another.
No, I love it. This is great. This is great.
If you really want to fight me on this one, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I would say then you do have to factor in the natural abilities, right? The going to that last thing of it's like, we have all seen tough motherfuckers that will beat up a fighter that knows a little something, and it's truly just the fight and the fighter sometimes, at certain levels. And when we're talking lower levels at different levels, right? So it's like you have a sub-tier B-level fighter that goes against another sub-tier B-level fighter. If that one fighter is just stronger, faster, tougher, more conditioned, and then maybe even just more will to win, it's going to be a different situation.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Physicality matters, attributes matter. I will say I don't think they matter as much as people pretend they do. It's just like we were talking about with Canelo earlier. I think, taking a punch is a skill. You know what I mean? Learning how to see, learning how to take the sting off that shot. Having a chin is a skill. I always use with my guys, I use Julio Cesar Chavez as an example. You know, Julio Cesar Chavez is known for a couple things, right? He's known for having an unending gas tank, all right? And he's known for having an iron chin. But if you watch his fights, both of those things are a result of him having one of the most efficient styles I've ever seen. Everything is so small. He layers in his defense. Nothing's big. He's not jumping anywhere. He saves that energy. He's never using any more energy than if you were out walking your dog when he's in that fight.
That's right.
And because he's always on base, he's always in a position to see and absorb force. And because all of those movements are small and subtle, he's not using a bunch of energy. So, you can say, oh, he has this awesome gas tank and he has this tough, Mexican chin. Or you can say those things that you look at as attributes are a result of skill. They're a result of style. That's what allows him to do that, So I agree with you. You get two guys that are like B-grade fighters in there that are going to throw themselves at each other, the harder rock's going to win. I get that. But that's not what we should be looking to for study. We should be looking to the guys who are the best, and we should say what supports that bestness. Yeah.
Understood. And you're coming at it from a pure coach perspective, and I'm taking my coach hat off in a sense, and I'm looking at almost from another perspective outside of it. But it sounds like something we could dive like really
I'd love
into
it.
and spend an hour on.
I love it. I want you to say I really appreciate you because you said something that every good boxer and every good coach and every good just artist, somebody who loves something says. You said a couple minutes ago, you said, I'm going to argue with myself for a second here. That's how you're thinking through ideas and we're figuring it out,
That's right. Well, I appreciate it, brother. I know you do the same thing, so that's why I like talking with you.
Yeah.
So going on to a next one, because it's funny, one of the ones I had here is like us kind of digging deeper into this specific topic. So let's jump to a different topic for the last kind of 11 minutes or so. We're not going to talk about infighting, even though that was the first one, because I feel like that's a big one that we can run down.
We'd be here for a whole nother hour.
We're going to go to something theoretically simpler, but it's not. So there's a lot of talk, obviously, with different types of drills, different types of training. Mm-hmm. And, you have the whole eco conversation, which is blowing up in jiu-jitsu.
What is that? I'm unfamiliar with that. What is eco?
Ecological training?
No, I don't even know what this is.
Okay. So now I'm sounding like one of those idiots on a Reddit forum, right? So it's the idea. Goodness, man, I'm not going to try to
I'm sorry, man.
Explain it. No, you're good, brother. So okay, it's basically the idea almost, and it's similar to what you talk about with all the punches. Like, let me actually try to steel man eco, because it's not like I totally disagree with it either. But
yeah.
Okay. So your thing of like, you could label like 50 punches, right? Or, 100 possible punches, right? That someone can throw. And that's almost what eco is in a sense. It's the idea that, you or I as coaches are not the only disseminators of information, that the athlete themselves just needs the environment and maybe the right constraints in that environment to elicit the learning. And so I'll give you an example of where I have seen this come into play, like very strongly. And you tell me if you've seen this, all right? I have seen very, very good fighters, very good amateur fighters, elite level amateur fighters, be with very bad coaches that are and now granted, some of these people, like if you want to, give you the opposite argument to this, some of these people started with maybe someone that built a foundational base, but man, I have seen fighters be with just coaches that don't know their butt from a hole in the ground, but the fighter themselves knows, right? To your point with Hamed or with Augustus, it's not that they can tell you, but their body knows. And that's kind of the idea of eco, is it's like you're going to create trainings and drills with constraints on it that allow someone to explore and to build out and find, right? So it's like, with jiu-jitsu, You can explain the theory of jiu-jitsu to me. We can drill the pieces, but then of course I'm going to learn so much of application when we actually roll. But then of course with boxing, there's a challenge of concussive and subconcussive injuries. So
Yeah.
then therefore that's not quite as easy. And then of course there's still the importance of drilling and drilling with resistance. And so that's a whole thing.
Yeah. So, I can kind of make a comparison. I always say in a lot of city gyms, they have enough foot traffic that they can just have guys spar. And if the guys spar, eventually, the cream will rise to the top. I think that
Right.
gyms where they just throw you in there on your first day and everybody starts fighting and that's what the gym is. I don't think that's the optimal way to learn, but I do think that that is a really good filter system to reveal people that may already have a proclivity for being good at this thing. So like I say this a lot about like CrossFit. Like I don't think CrossFit is the best tool for developing elite athleticism, but I think it is an excellent tool for revealing people who are likely already elite athletes. And I feel that way about like this eco training. If you just throw a bunch of guys, this is the billion infinite chimps with typewriters writing Shakespeare. If you just throw a bunch of guys in the boxing ring and let them box, they will learn a modicum of boxing skills just by existing, like I said, in that system, you know? But I've found with my development that you get more out of guys if you can get them on the right track before they have the temptation of going maverick and improving things themselves. So at my gym,
Correct.
most guys are here 4 to 6 months doing purely live drilling, defense rounds, high and low drills, jab sparring, stuff like that before they ever get to take the leash off and completely open up. So like eco training is correct in the sense that creating a healthy, structured environment instead of literally holding the hand of an athlete and playing them like a video game all the way through. But the honest answer is like, like you said, too hot, too cold. The honest answer is somewhere in the middle. Like you need to let the guys work and learn on their own, but like somebody has to be the tip of the spear who already knows how to box, who already knows what the end of this journey looks like to make sure that everybody's pointed in the right direction. That's kind of my take on that.
And to your point, because I believe that you're like this, having openness enough to know that that end result looks a little different sometimes.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It doesn't have to look exactly the same from fighter to fighter, because that's the term that I took from a baseball recruiter, which is clone coaches.
Yeah.
You know that fighter came from that gym because he does everything the exact same way everyone else does it in that gym. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I really pride myself on. And I know I'm sure you do as well, where it's like I'm 5 foot. Actually, I found out I'm 5'8" 3/4. So I'm almost 5'9", but I thought I was 5'8". How tall are you?
It's funny. I had a similar thing. I've been telling people I'm 5'10", but I got measured last week and I'm only 5'9", bro.
So, but it's like you, because of how you approach coaching, you can help a 6'3" guy get better, and you can help a 5'3" guy get better.
Yep.
Right? 6 foot and 5'3", or 6'3" and 5'3", and that's what I'm really proud of too. I have this one fighter I'm working with now, and they're tall and very tall for their weight class, and I pride myself on like I can teach you tall people stuff. I couldn't do tall people stuff, but I can teach you it, and I can tell you, the things that work and don't work, and how we can make it better, and coach you on it. Versus those clone coaches where it's like I only train tall people, I can only train short people, I can only train this type of fighter.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that other touch of other touch is because the steel manning again of ecological training is, just so ecological people don't like go all crazy on you from this video, is because it's a little culty, but people are kind of stepping away from that cultiness. But is that when you do static drilling and it's so closed and it's not open at all, it does become unuseful at a point. And if you know too much what's going on, so for instance, if you and I do a drill, and like with your experience in combat and my experience, and I shoot a 1, 2, 3, and you defend it, and then you shoot a 1, 2, 3, and I defend it, and we go back and forth, unless we're really actively trying to do something else that you and I are both not used to defensively or something else, the drill gets very low on reward or of actually making us better. But if we add in elements of uncertainty, so the three might be a headshot or a body shot. All the shots might be headshots or body shots. It might be a 1-2-3. It might be a 1-3-2. We don't know what's going to be. Or we're really challenged to change what we do defensively in a way that we're not used to. That's where it becomes more valuable a drill. And so that's kind of what the argument is for ecological, which to your point and to my point as well is true, is that you see a lot of these choreographed drills which look really pretty and look really advanced, but they serve very little purpose, specifically as you get skill acquisition, because now you don't have a contextual understanding of the skill. You just have an understanding within a refined melody that you're playing, right?
Well, you and I have talked about this before, where like this is the exact reason what you're describing in a gym context is also present in the YouTube boxing community. This is the reason that I started a channel, was because I'd have my guys ask me, they'd say, Coach, where can I find this online? And at the time, now we have a couple good channels, but at the time, a couple years ago, there really wasn't much, and something that I notice a lot, coaches do this. All right. Channels on YouTube do this too, where people love to teach techniques. They love to teach tricks, but nobody teaches context. You know what I mean? Nobody gives you the tools to recognize when you'd hook off the jab, who you'd hook off the jab with, what hooking off the jab accomplishes. They just give you a video. This is hooking off the jab. And I think there's a lot of that in boxing coaching. There are plenty of coaches that they teach combos. All right, that's cool, I guess, but like, when would you use this combo? What is the context of this combo? And like, that's always been like the thesis of my channel, is talking about why and when and how you can play with these different principles. All right. And it's definitely pieces of your channel too, because you go into these deep dives where the camera's on you and you're talking for 20 minutes, where you are really like getting into the nitty gritty and the nuance of these things, because it's never just, I say this all the time to my guys, it's not like one day you learn like a secret punch and all of a sudden you're a good boxer. It's a lot more like
Right.
playing chess, where like I can teach you how to play chess in 2 minutes, what all the techniques are, or sorry, how you move all the pieces around. And then you can spend your whole life trying to become a grandmaster and learning the context of that. Boxing is not technically hard. It's tactically hard. None of the techniques are difficult to do. It's really hard to apply them under duress and in the appropriate situation. So like, you've got the right idea, where like that ambiguity about, okay, somebody's going to set you up with that 1-2-3 high, 1-2-3 high, 1-2-3 low. And you need to understand enough, or layer in your defense, or recognize, or however you want to frame it as a coach, to not be a sucker for that setup. That's a valuable, usable thing, not just some canned combo that you spam at the wall.